Hi, I'm Dr. Andrea Stover, licensed marriage and family therapist, and you're listening to the Modern Day Romantic Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Today, I'm really excited to dive into this topic with you. I've yet to reveal on the podcast that I study psychological astrology. I've been studying it for close to a decade now. And quite frankly, I've yet to find any tool, system, language that really helps to encapsulate the depth of who each of us are as unique individuals than psychological astrology. Now, before you skip over this episode, if you know nothing about astrology, or if you feel like that might be against your belief system, let me just tell you, I do not practice any type of fortune telling, any type of deterministic astrology. I practice more in the way that Carl Jung did with his patients and analysans, in that he saw the map, the natal chart, so that the picture of the sky at the moment you were born, as a symbolic representation of the psyche and the life that that individual would be living. And I did an episode on this earlier, but he saw astrology as being synchronistic, meaning the planets weren't causing things to happen to us, but it was more that acausal correlation, kind of, oh, this happens, and as a result, this shows up in our life, or this topic comes up for us to process and come into greater consciousness in our own lives around. Okay. So there's just a brief little preface I wanted to say before getting into what I actually want to talk about today. So there are so many different things I could talk about when it comes to astrology, but for today's purposes, I thought it would be really useful if we spent some time talking about the moon. So the moon symbolically represents many, many things. It represents our emotions. It represents how we feel nurtured, or nurturance in general. It can represent our inner child. It represents mothering and maybe our relationship with mother, or how we might mother. It represents what helps us feel secure. It represents our home, family, all creature comforts that would feel good to us. And as I'm sure everyone, or most everyone, knows, there are 12 signs in the Zodiac. So there are 12 possibilities for what sign the moon was in the moment you were born. Now that's simplistic right there. And let me add another layer of complexity, in that the moon was in a certain sign and all the other planets were in whatever sign they were in, and that the planets can also be in aspect to one another as well. So that can complicate the interpretation of the moon and how that shows up in you or in your life, in your relationships. So we're really going to oversimplify the moon today as we talk about it in terms of your own awareness around what nurturance is to you, for you, how you feel safe, what provides comfort for you, what may come up and cause insecurity, how your emotions might display themselves, or kind of the flavoring of you as an emotional creature. And all of this is hopefully, ideally, to benefit you, to learning more about yourself and knowing, hey, that's right. Yeah, I have a particular way that I feel most nurtured or most safe. And that's going to be the foundation to any healthy, solid, functional relationship that you can have with anyone else. In some ways, this is sort of like the love languages of the Zodiac. I could also do an episode on the planet Venus and what love means to us in that regard too, based on what sign Venus is in your chart. But today, again, we're focusing on the moon. We're focusing on ways to empower you to self-nurture, to grow your self-knowledge, and to be able to maybe understand, oh, I am looking for a certain something or other, and I probably tend to give this to others as my way of showing nurturance and love. And maybe they have a different way of doing that. So let's see what we can come up with. I'm going to take us as quick as I can and just do a simple overview of the moon through the signs, the 12 signs of the zodiac. And I will also say, if you have no clue what I'm talking about but are interested, I will post a link in the show notes for you to be able to run your own natal chart. And there are a lot of websites online that allow you to do that for free. All you would need is your birth date, the exact time of your birth, and that's really important, and the place or location of your birth. So if you have those three things, you'll be able to run your own natal chart and see where your moon sign is in your natal chart, and maybe listen in and get some type of an understanding of yourself and see how this fits. And again, if it doesn't for some reason, well, two things. One, you want to make sure your birth time is accurate to the minute. And two, just remember that there are other aspects and components that go into how the moon shows up for each of us. So I'll leave that at that. Okay. So let's start with the moon in Aries. If you have the moon in Aries, you're going to feel nurtured and maybe really need in a relationship to be able to assert your independence. You're going to need to be able to fight, and maybe love is fighting for you. Maybe it's very individualistic, being a pioneer, being a leader, wanting to be in charge, a lot of self-assertion. You may have a lot of creative sparks or ideas and enjoy beginning. So the beginning of something new, it gives you a lot of energy, a lot of charge. So you would want to know that about yourself, and or if your partner has a moon in Aries, that's the opposite of the sign of the lovers, which is Libra. So this would maybe be someone who is seeking a lot of independence, and you may say, hey, I want a lot of closeness. And that person may say, that's fine, but I don't. I want to go do my own thing every now and again, or I need to do that in order to nurture myself. So moon in Aries, lots of fiery charge, loves new beginnings, is naturally a good leader, oftentimes can be a little headstrong, can be emotionally not afraid to fight. And usually, if there's a fight, they're also quick to move on after the fight too. So kind of the sparring match occurs, and then let's move forward. Okay. Next would be the moon in Taurus. So a Taurian moon is going to feel really nurtured and safe by a lot of creature comforts as far as using the senses. So seeing beautiful things, having delicious food and the smells that might accompany that food. They're going to feel nurtured by having resources. So this could be, if this is you, you might also feel safe when you have enough money in your bank account, or you don't have to worry about threats to your security in some way on the material level. You might feel really nurtured and nourished by having touch, by having closeness, like physical proximity. Actually, and again, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's totally fine. But some of you might. But the moon is actually exalted in Taurus, meaning it really shines there. It's a really strong sign for the moon to be in. The shadow side might be being a bit possessive and wanting to hold on. So maybe being a bit stubborn at times, or slow to change, and maybe almost falling into inertia on some level. That could be a shadow side from the emotional perspective. But ultimately, you're looking for solid, stable security, reliability, dependability, and add some beauty in there, beautiful trees, beautiful flowers, and you'll probably be pretty nurtured. Okay. Next is the moon in Gemini. So this is a really, I have a lot of fun thinking about this, but I think the moon in Gemini is a person who is nurtured by knowledge, by learning, by constant movement. There's a lot of curiosity, a wanting to take in new information, getting bored easily. So just, flittering about, wanting to have social contact, wanting to talk, being very talkative. That would be very nurturing for the moon in Gemini. Gemini is also the sign of siblings. It could mean feeling really nurtured and connected to siblings. It could mean your own mother felt more like a sibling or someone you enjoyed talking with. And it could also mean that when you're feeling a little low and you maybe need to take care of yourself, stereotypically, I think people oftentimes say, oh, well, maybe you need like a quiet night in or take a bath or something like that. But the moon in Gemini is going to be like, no, I need to go out and I need to talk and I need to enroll in a course and I need to learn something. Maybe I need to listen to podcasts. So that's a bit about the moon in Gemini. Next is the moon in Cancer. This is a very nice pairing, the moon in Cancer. So this is going to be a lot about emotional safety, feeling emotionally connected, emotionally sensitive as well. So one thing I've noticed with watery moons is that there is a lot of emotional sensitivity, and also sometimes it's difficult to put the emotions into words. Sometimes there's more of an intuitive feel to something, and it can be very overwhelming because you're such a sensitive feeler. You have absorbed a lot, taken a lot in, but it's difficult to express that without, crying or just having a lot of emotionality. And so if we again tie this into maybe you're in a relationship with someone who does not have a watery moon and gets very flooded by your expression of your feelings or emotions, it's good to just understand, hey, this is me, this is what I need. I might need to just withdraw or retreat, and I might need to be able to feel my feelings in order to take care of myself. Maybe I am the one that needs the bubble bath. Maybe I need to write out how I feel. Maybe I got to get it out somehow. I got to be able to feel close. I feel connected and safe when I'm able to share and feel connected emotionally. Where there's an emotional resonance, you feel mirrored, you feel held, you feel seen in your emotions. Moon in Cancer is also going to really enjoy, well, they're going to be drawn to likely taking care of others or wanting to be taken care of as well, and might enjoy being at home. Maybe that's a way to tend to oneself, is to be able to be at home for a bit, be around family, maybe be a homebody. Those can all be Cancerian qualities as well. Okay, next we move to the moon in Leo. So the Leo moon is someone who might really shine bright, that their emotions could be a touch dramatic at times, but really a lot of warmth, a lot of maybe being able to be in the spotlight a bit, loving to play, loving to be delighted and to delight others. Others might naturally be drawn to this kind of brightness. You could be cheery. You could have a tremendous love for being around children and, like I said, play, but really enjoy creativity, enjoy all the pleasures, enjoy being romanced. Those are all very Leonine things. Leo is the lion, king of the jungle. So there is a lot there. There's a lot of power, maybe some bravado, some enjoying being admired, with the moon there. Being seen, being admired for who you are is going to feed you emotionally. That's going to help you feel safe. That's going to help you feel connected and close to someone. It's okay to have that. I mean, that if that's who you are, that's who you are. There's nothing wrong with that. So all of these things are permission to be you, and to be able to say, oh yeah, I kind of do get a little cranky if I don't feel like I'm getting enough attention, or I really do need to be the center have the spotlight on me sometimes, and that's okay. And I do feel my feelings really big and loud and bold and proud, and that's okay too. You just want to watch for the shadow side sometimes, which is maybe sulking if you don't get enough attention, or being in the, instead of childlike, being childish at times. But I think there's such a magnetic draw with the moon in Leo, really being able to light up the home, light up the family. And maybe this is how you viewed your own mother. Or so full permission to all moon in Leos. Be you, be bold, shine, have fun, play, create. That is you. Next is the moon in Virgo. So this is someone who would feel really nurtured by being in the nitty-gritty details of things, maybe even like splitting hairs to understand, the smallest or tiniest of mechanisms. You might feel really nurtured by being a clean freak. You might feel really nurtured by organizing your closet and color coding it. You might feel really safe and feel comforted by having hand sanitizer and, disinfecting things and just being a clean freak in general. Go you. That's awesome. If that's you. You might also be someone who would be really interested in leading a very healthy lifestyle as far as body or diet. Perhaps you can be a little picky of an eater, or have very particular things that you won't eat for one reason or another, and things that you absolutely have to eat. You might really enjoy having routines and rituals to keep you grounded. A little bit of the shadow side with the sign Virgo in general, and so applying that to the moon, would maybe be being a bit critical of yourself, of your emotions, maybe having perfectionistic expectations for yourself, or on others, let's say, never feeling like you're good enough, never feeling like what someone else is doing is good enough to nurture you. Could have felt criticized growing up. So you want to really watch that if that rears itself within this moon in Virgo in you. But embrace this part that wants everything to have a category, a place. And that doesn't necessarily mean externally either. That could mean just internally organizing your emotions. You might analyze yourself and your own emotions. It may be harder at times to feel them rather than, be in analysis of them. So that's a bit of moon in Virgo. Next is moon in Libra. So remember, I said this is the opposite one of the moon in Aries we started with. So moon in Libra, it's an air sign. So it does want conversation. It wants connection. It needs other people. But this is really the sign that signifies partnership and marriage. And you're going to be nurtured more than likely and be looking for partnership, be looking for the other. You aren't looking so much to keep that balance within just you and yourself, although Libra is the sign of the scales and balance. And yes, you're going to want to stay emotionally balanced. So you might be conflict avoidant. You may not like to upset the apple cart. And you may, if you're in a relationship, really try to find the win-win for you and for your partner. The shadow side is that you might lose yourself in the other and maybe veer off into this all too often used word codependence, where, oh, I don't know how I feel, oh, how do we feel? Like you're asking your partner how you feel, well, how they feel so that you know how you feel, kind of thing. So that's kind of the shadow side of the moon in Libra, is being too oriented to the other, or being too oriented to finding that, right balance or the justice, or it's not perfectionism so much as as it is still like being fixated on, what that balance. And sometimes in life, things can't be balanced. Like that's part of it. It ebbs and it flows. There's a dynamism to anything in life. So to want it to try to be static and just stay in that, middle ground, balanced place, and that's not really going to be conducive to a relationship, right? Or even just living your own life. So, beautiful sign. You might really enjoy and be nurtured by like aesthetically pleasing, going to the art galleries, just being around beautiful things, design. All of those things would be Libran and very nurturing, as well as it could be a romantic sign and seeking harmony with the other. Next is Moon in Scorpio. So this is a really powerful moon, someone who has strong emotional undercurrents. You might pick up on that which is beneath the surface that's not being said. So in other words, like a shadow sniffer outer kind of person. Like you can just say, you can see and sniff out what doesn't feel like it's authentic, what doesn't feel like it fits, what doesn't feel like it's right. You might really be looking for a lot of intensity. You want eroticism. And I don't just mean sex or, a sexual union with someone, but you want things to be alive. Like that's eros, aliveness. You want to be working on things that feel like they have the capacity to be transformed. Scorpio is often a sign that is associated with death and rebirth. And that's not necessarily physical death, but it's kind of going through cycles and being tested with going through crisis or experiences that bring out survival instincts and shows us our tenacity. So there could be a lot of fighting or a lot of intensity and even traumatic things that have happened kind of in that dark space or dark place. And yet the Scorpio moon knows how to regenerate itself. So there's something in there that is unshakable, that withstands all of the crises and the complexity. There's a lot of emotional complexity, and I think that's great. I think that's wonderful. That means there's depth, right? And so if this is you, it's getting to know and exploring your inner depths, and you're going to want someone who can hold that space for and with you and meet you and isn't afraid of you and isn't afraid of going to the depths with you. That's a bit about the Scorpio moon. Next is the moon in Sagittarius. So this is a really optimistic, could be romantic, very exuberant moon. So emotionally, you might have these highs or high visions or ideals around what it is you would like to do next. You may dream out loud and want to go on adventures, whether those be internal adventures or overseas for a trip or, travel abroad, or maybe you really like to philosophize too. That would be a very Sagittarian quality. So the moon in Sagittarius, you're going to feel nurtured when you're able to be in touch with exploring the bounds, being able to be, well, the shadow, it would be a bit like scattered or getting too diffuse, but you really want to expand out. You want to explore. You want to feel all that is there in the meaning. You're exploring the meaning of life. You want to understand, not just take in a little bit of knowledge, or excuse me, a little bit of information. You want real knowledge. You're on a quest for meaning, and you might get a bit ahead of yourself at times and burn yourself out. So that's something to watch for with the moon in Sag. But overall, in general, right, simplistic terms, not knowing charts or aspects or anything, just a really big, boisterous moon that is usually pretty optimistic and fun to be around. Okay, next is the moon in Capricorn. If you have the moon in Capricorn, you're going to feel really nurtured by structure. You're going to need that. You might be emotionally mature. You might have a difficult time finding the purpose in exploring your emotions or in expressing them with others. For you, you may feel a little cut off. Sometimes you could feel a little heavy emotionally, but there can be this real maturity, and you have a vision, you have something you want to work towards. There's going to be there could be some type of desire to feel nurtured through hard work, through accomplishment and achievement through time, by being able to provide for others or have that long-term vision and do the hard work of executing in order to meet whatever that is for yourself. It's probably not the easiest of signs for the moon to be in that it's you might feel melancholic. And so if we're in a melancholic state, what is it that we need to feel nurtured or nourished? And through time, learning about yourself, learning about you as an emotional creature, okay, what maybe these periods of feeling cut off or needing to isolate, maybe that's just part of your existence, and that's okay too. Maybe there's something in there around being able to use that time to develop realistic goals. So you may really enjoy having boundaries. Like I said, the structure piece, you might show as being cool, calm, and collected on the outside. Of course, there's stuff going on within each of us at all times. But if you find that structure, if you find the boundaries, that's your key to success in order to express your emotions, in order to find, where am I at in all of this? If you are confronted with too much emotion without having the inner structures and or having structure outside of yourself in place, it might be very flooding and overwhelming. And that might lead to feeling like you need to cut off or isolate or restrict in some way. So those are just a few things there's a lot more I could say about the moon in Capricorn. Okay, next is the moon in Aquarius. So this is a really interesting moon sign. Usually Aquarians in general can be objective. So they're really analyzing and seeking to understand all sorts of patterns and things going on. And though Aquarians and the moon in Aquarius might look like there's socialization and connection happening, sometimes moon in Aquarius can feel different from other people, can feel even a bit detached from their own emotions. So it turns more, again, intellectual, into a heady exploration of and analyzing themselves or others and humanity at large. But it's not always the easiest sign to be able to connect one-to-one with oneself and other members of, the family, or in a relationship. You may need times also of kind of cutting off or withdrawing. You might have sudden, unexpected uprisings of emotions at times too. It may not be steady across the board. So if you get really impassioned by something or feel like something is a cause worth fighting for, that can really be nurturing and soothing to an Aquarian moon. Studying humanity, being idealistic, and from an intellectual, theoretical perspective could be Aquarian. But this isn't going to likely feel like being in your emotions with moon in Aquarius isn't likely going to be look like the moon in Cancer, let's say, what I was saying, this watery, like, outpouring of feelings and emoting and all of that. No, that is not the moon in Aquarius. It's going to show up very differently. And the other thing I would say about Aquarians and the moon in Aquarius is that there can be this rebellious streak in there. There can be a desire to kind of shake things up and break the mold a bit and be revolutionary in your own way of, no, I'm not going to play by the rules. I'm going to do it my own way. And that in and of itself can feel really nourishing to a moon in Aquarius. So if that is who you're partnered with, you're going to want to know that too. And that, hey, sometimes if they need to do something like that, that's them expressing themselves. And I don't need to, take it so literally or seriously every single time, because I'm watching and I'm supporting and I'm allowing them to be themselves in this way. And I think the one thing I would say is trying to not constellate that the rebellion needs to take place in the relationship. There is a way to maybe channel it in a way that allows for a relationship as well and doesn't, shake or rock the foundation by pushing against or rebelling in relationship. Not all Aquarians are like that at all. I'm just speaking in general terms there. Okay. So next and finally, we have the moon in Pisces. Wow, what a sensitive sign Pisces is. So this could be someone who has a very hard time holding emotional boundaries. It may be someone who's easily flooded by their own emotions and others and has a hard time telling whose is what. So again, this may be a way of working with that could be to isolate a bit, to try to provide oneself your own containment, but a very creative, beautiful, sensitive, oftentimes very sensitive sign. And so emotionally, maybe being highly empathetic and very moved and touched by others and their stories and wanting to maybe rescue, wanting to help. But I think the other side of that could be also with getting lost some, it could be escaping because it's so overwhelming to not have boundaries and to be able to tell whose is what. So sometimes, sadly and truthfully, there can be addiction where, it's just easier to have something to numb all this sensitivity or escape into. And by no means am I saying that Pisces or a moon in Pisces is the only sign that could battle addiction or anything like that. But I do think that is one manifestation of this. There could also be a nurturance through feeling very spiritually connected. And again, that could be with a lot of signs, but with the moon in Pisces especially, there is that propensity to merge or fuse and lose oneself. So finding something larger than oneself to be a part of can be very nurturing, can be very containing as well. It can be instinctually, the moon is also our instincts, what one seeks out. Like I said, you would just want to watch that escapism a bit and try to maintain as much consciousness as you can if that's you or if that's your partner. Hey, this is what I'm doing right now and here's why, as opposed to losing yourself. And that's a really chaotic place to be, actually, is being lost and not knowing if, when, or how you're going to find yourself again. Most of us do tend to circle back around and come into some part of ourselves. But the Pisces moon could also be a real shapeshifter and take on different forms and identities based on whomever they're around. So that's something, and maybe they're going to need to retreat or withdraw in order to feel like they can come back into touch with themselves some. All right, so we've gone through all 12 signs of the zodiac through the moon. And what I really want to conclude with is take a look at your chart if you want to. See where your moon sign, what sign the moon is in your chart, and reflect on this a bit. There's a ton of information on the internet about all this. All you would have to do is type in moon in Leo, moon in Cancer, and you'll find a lot of descriptors out there for interpretations of what that could be. We really want to know, I hope, as much as we can about ourselves so that we know how best to take care of ourselves. But relationally speaking, knowing how you feel most nurtured, that's going to be huge to be able to know how to do that for yourself and also communicate that to your partner and learn what their language is. without being able to do that, oftentimes we just think everyone should be like us. And you can see there's a 1 in 12 shot that they're going to be like you when it comes to, this feeling of, well, how one relates to their emotions, how they relate to their emotions, how they express emotions, how they seek to feel secure, how important, being withdrawn and in or being more out and around people, being more vocal versus being more in touch with the feelings and expressing those through the body, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so there's just so many more things I could say, but I'm going to leave it at that. I thank you for listening to this, especially if astrology is like a foreign language to you. I have really found immense value in being able to do this work with clients. It's so cool to do with couples too, to help them better understand the differences and similarities. Oh yeah, I see they're like that now. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just to have language on things that can be helpful. All right, thanks so much, and I'll see you next episode. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you're interested in learning about ways to work with me, head over to my website, themoderndayromantic.com. From there, you'll be able to contact me and learn a bit more about the customized intensives and retreats I offer both individuals and couples. You'll also be able to support future podcast production via Patreon. There are several membership levels to choose from, including the Beating Hearts Club, which gives you access to exclusive content every month. Thanks so much for your support, and I'll see you next episode.